Hi there, my name is Samantha Urban and I'm looking to teach 10th grade English, possibly venture on to AP, but for right now this is a lesson on grammar for 10th grade. It will be the second in my anticipated set of 5, so my basis for learning will be in the first lesson they will learn about subject and object of a sentence because we're going to focus on sentence structure in this lesson. And my focus will be on reaching my 2 ELL students specifically. My classroom will have a set of 5 pods of 4, so I'm hoping to only have about 20 kids based on where I want a student teach in the Bellevue district. And they will be facing each other. This will be midway into the year, so I'll have a good idea of the level of my students in generalities. So my stronger native speakers will be paired with my 2 ELL, so they won't be in the same pod, but I will keep it open for an option for them to move together when we get to specified learning, which will come up later in the lesson. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to tackle the direct instruction method for this because I feel it'll be important that they get to see me working on my examples, helping me, then progressing to doing it on their own as I circulate the room, and then I also have a worksheet made up for them to take home for homework. So this does come off the Common Core State Standards that they will use knowledge of language and its conventions when writing, speaking, reading, and listening, and they will demonstrate command of the conventions of standard English, capitalization, punctuation, and spelling when writing. And I mentioned that's in the Common Core. And I will be able to assess this in the classroom before they have to do it on their own, and it will be an easy opportunity for a formative assessment after they bring in their homework. I'll be able to go from there and see if I need to reteach anything, or if we're ready to progress on further in the unit to other elements of speech. So what my strategy will be, this is the worksheet that I have devised. So there's examples for each, and the first will be on subject verb, and this will be on a document camera, so or any accessible overhead if I need. So all of the students will be able to view the examples I'm going over, and I will also have more made up if I need. And so like the first one is the subject verb. My car broke down. We will identify the subject and the verb, I will in the first example. We'll move on to another. Then the students will help me. Maybe I'll identify the subject, they'll identify the verb. And then I will have their worksheets in front of them, and they'll be able to work together in pods or on their own as I'm circulating, helping for questions. And this is important for English language learners specifically, because if they're a little uncomfortable asking for help, not being a native speaker, I will be able to help them more individually, so they're not any fear of embarrassment, which is tough in high school element. And so then we'll progress to subject, verb, and object, and we'll repeat that. Repeat the process, I will do an example, they will help me in the example, they will work on their own as I circulate, and then we will move on to the next step. And I'm looking at having probably 50-minute blocks, so we will probably only be able to get through this one lesson in one day, hopefully, would be my goal. And that way when they go home for homework, it won't be too much of an inconvenience. They'll have a lot of practice, and it's something that's easy to duplicate with other examples if there is more practice needed. And there's plenty of examples of sentences online, and there's a lot of resources for them where they can look up definitions. And I also plan to have a lexicon going for all the individual students that they can access and individually personalize. So for my English language learners, they can add more words if they need to, and the only person the only 2 people that'll see it would be me and the student. So there's nothing they need to share with other students. So if they need to put something as simple as the definition of a preposition, which I hope all of my students will, they won't have to feel embarrassed about that. So what else is involved in this lesson is the point will be complements of sentences and adverbials. So that'll come up later as we progress down the sentence, and that'll really be the highlight. So the beginning parts of the lesson I'm anticipating are prior knowledge, but at the same time you cannot make any assumptions because we do not know the educational background of all of our students. So this will be a good judge for the rest of the lesson. And we'll also cover direct objects and indirect objects. And on the worksheets I've provided for my students, there's definitions as well as plenty of examples. There also is, on this wonderful worksheet down at the bottom, there's notes accessible, so they have examples of these words. And so it's not, they have more in front of them. It's not just me regurgitating information. And what I hope to do specifically with this lesson, since it's so key to reading perfectly or better, or writing more eloquently, I hope to work with the Spanish teachers, because the grammar and sentence structure in their culture is different than ours. So if I can somehow find resources for more of like a mediator between the two, so this would be an opportunity for my native English speakers to learn something more about Spanish sentence structure specifically, because I love the English language learners are Hispanic in my classroom. And this would be a good way to bring the two together. So when I'm trying to teach them, I could either, if they are comfortable, I could make it a lesson on that specifically. So we would talk about the Spanish sentence structure and how it translates, and directly use the same examples and put it in an English sentence structure. So that way they can see where it was in their culture and where it is in ours. And that, like I mentioned, so then on the back of the worksheet we have 5 exercises. Not too intensive. They have about 5 parts each. So I'm still able to get a score in the grade book to prove that I'm assessing my students. But at the same time, there's plenty of opportunity for reteaching or moving on. Because we have to keep in mind that we cannot move on with gaps. We can't, because especially with our English language learners, their achievement gap is, they're at a higher disadvantage than most. And so my performance expectation and evidence of that, well, I will expect a completed worksheet from all of my students the following class period and less than 3 errors. And obviously it'll be up to me how grand those errors are. There's always judgment in that. But specifically I'll be looking at with the Spanish speakers, because then I will see if maybe it is a cultural difference. Maybe they are analyzing it with the Spanish sentence structure in mind, and then that's something I might be able to pull aside for individual learning, and that's when I'll bring the 2 Hispanic students, English language learners into the same pod with me while the others are working on their worksheets, and we'll work on that together. And that will have been me getting specialized training from the Spanish teacher, so I know how to correct these issues. So this will be criterion standard, is because, and I will keep that for the rest of the grammar unit, so it'll be something they're used to. It will be the same structure for that week. For those 5 lessons, we will have the direct instruction method in class, and then they will finish the worksheet at home. So they'll have new application of different parts of speech in the sentence, but at the same time they'll have that consistency. What else? Yes, I will need a copier, and I also hope to have colored pencils or other identifiable markers in my classroom. So when we identify a subject, we can track that through the sentence, and that'll make it a lot easier for my English language learners to track it like the native speakers take for granted. And that'll be a really helpful tool for them, because then they can visualize it. And these worksheets, I will grade them in class the next day, so they will be able to use them when they're doing homework for future reference. So for instance, this is learning complementizers. So when the next lesson comes along, and that's supposed to be prior knowledge, they will have this worksheet to remind them, so it's always right in front of them. I'm a big fan of resources. And so these workbooks that they'll be compiling with the lexicon that they keep individually, or these that I've provided for them, that'll really make their learning more of a progression instead of it'll be a constant curve instead of a step ladder. So then, and I also really anticipate having a very comfortable classroom. So as much as I hope, or I will make these accommodations to not embarrass my students, I do want them to be able to reach out to me if they need help. And that's where I like the pods, because they have their fellow students to lean on. And when in doubt, I'm a very approachable teacher, and they'll be able to come to my desk or during lunch or after hours to get that help. Thank you.